listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast. Today I am joined by a very, very special guest. His name is Elliot Smith, host of the Arsenal Vision podcast. Elliot, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, I think, considering that we're in the doldrums of an international break and Arsenal lost their last game. I'm holding up okay.
Yeah, well, today we're going to have a talk about the window, the expectations that come with that, and the squad that Mikel now has at his disposal. So first up, let's touch on the Liverpool game, because I don't think we can get away with that. We obviously have lost. It was a game that was incredibly tight, very fine margins, and decided by an incredible free kick. But it has led to a lot of criticism around Mikel, especially with the attacking additions that have come in and the conservative nature of the play. Although for me personally, I think that's been overstated just because it is at Anfield. So talk to me quickly about that.
Yeah, I think the fundamental frustration around what's regarded as conservatism, I think, focuses on, firstly, the lineup. And I understand that people regard starting Mikel Merino in midfield as conservative. Some people also regard starting Martinelli instead of Eberechi Eze as conservative. And I kind of would take issue with both of those points. The first being that Mikel Merino started at the Bernabeu, right? He started against Real Madrid. He played Champions League semifinals in England and in Paris. He has that big game experience. And currently there is no more difficult fixture in English football than at Anfield. That is the toughest fixture of the season. And whatever you think of Ethan Nwaneri, and I really rate the player's talent, he is very much in the evolution stage, the development stage, as a midfielder. That's not a role he's had much. He played it for an hour against Leeds, but other than that, I don't believe he started in midfield in a Premier League game for Arsenal. So it's a big ask versus a guy who's a full Spain international and has played in midfield in some of the biggest fixtures in all world football. I think the Martinelli thing is an even stranger one in a sense, because until Eberechi Eze was signed on deadline day, Gabriel Martinelli is the first choice left wing for our Arsenal Football Club, especially with Nani Madueke starting off the right. So then the question again becomes, in a highly tactical game away, can you trust a player who's had 3 or 4 training sessions to come in from the start? I don't regard either of those things as particularly conservative, but Adam, what I do regard as conservative is just the length of time Mikel stuck with what he had out there. I think there was an option to go for them. I think we probably had more of the ball than we were even expecting to have. We were under less pressure than maybe we were expecting to be under. And I think based on Martinelli's performance, there was almost no risk to taking him off at halftime and letting Eze have half the game, because Martinelli simply was not contributing at a level that's consistent with what we want to be. And then, there is the question of some of the changes we made late down a goal, even I don't think were as front-footed as possible. So I don't agree with the claims of conservatism from the lineup standpoint, but from a substitution standpoint, I can see that for sure.
Yeah, and the big criticism has come around the substitutions, and that's something that I feel quite strongly about. I think first 45, Mikel got it right. At halftime, as you said, Martinelli's performance wasn't good enough. Hook him, get Eze on. I think Eze's sharp. He's ready. He's played against Liverpool already this season. He played against Chelsea, and he's a player that's ready to go. He's come in after a good pre-season, unlike someone like Gyökeres who went on strike. But these are things that are going to haunt us all season if we are going to play in a more conservative nature. I think there is also an element of, you've bought attackers, go and play with complete freedom. So that is my next question for you. What do you expect to see the next evolution? Because we have added 3 attackers, and whilst they're not Galactico transfer fees, you are talking at 3 players, with the cheapest being 52 million all in, given that I think the add-ons will be paid, alongside a tempo setter in Zubimendi, and now another fullback for a big fee. So what are your thoughts on the kind of evolution going forward as an attacking unit?
I think it's fascinating. I mean, this will be a really interesting test of Mikel's ability to fashion an effective attack, because he has so many different types of tools at his disposal now, right? I mean, he has completely different options for the left wing. Once Saka comes back fit, Nani Madueke is a carrier, a sprinter, right? An athlete. Eze is a technician. He's an orchestrator. He adds that bit of fantasy, but he's more of an interior than a winger. He has two totally different strikers when Kai's back. One much more hold-up oriented and comfortable in midfield, the other that wants to run in behind. And then the ability to completely transform the midfield from an attacking standpoint when he wants to use Ethan versus Odegaard, or if he wants to use Eze in the Rice role, drop Rice back into the Zubamendi role. And so I think it is incumbent upon Mikel, and I've been a huge supporter of what Mikel has done, because obviously we've been brilliant minus that last little next step to the absolute apex, the summit of the league and of Europe. But I think if there was going to be any critique that might land for me, it's that we still haven't seen an attack that is fully, fundamentally elite compared to the very, very best in the league. Even when we had the 91 goals, we know a lot of them came from set pieces, and we know the underlying metrics say we were still creating chances at around the third best in the league rate. We have the talent, I think, to close the gap and be at the very top. And seeing how Mikel evolves the way we do things from an attacking standpoint will be really fascinating. And by the way, I'm not suggesting that one way is right and one way is wrong. I just think he now has many different approaches at his disposal, and I'll be curious which one he lands on as the one he thinks is the right one.
Well, actually, that leads to an interesting question. Do you think he has too many options at his disposal, given that Mikel is a manager that does really think and overthink and work his squad?
Well, I think that can be an issue for any manager. I fall into the camp that I think as supporters, especially Arsenal supporters, have been burned by injuries. We maybe slightly over-invoke depth as a critical criteria for success. Obviously, injuries can wreck your season, and having depth can prevent injuries from wrecking your season. But for your season to actually culminate in a Premier League title or a Champions League trophy, I think you have to have a core of key elite players that you call on almost every game. And if we look at PSG down the stretch, for example, PSG's last few months of their season, especially in Europe, was spent starting essentially the same key players every single game and having two or three key contributors off the bench, one of whom is Bradley Barcola, right? I don't know that I've seen a team that I regard as a dominant team in England and Europe using 20 players regularly across a season outside of it being injury enforced. So I think Mikel has the challenge on his hands of keeping everybody engaged in the project, keeping all of these players happy, but also landing on a core group that really becomes the backbone of a successful season, such that when we get to winning time in March, in April, and in May, he's calling on that same group repeatedly from the start of games. And I think he's kind of got to whittle it down to the best possible collection of players he thinks he can deploy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's how he uses them, where he picks those tools as well. And as we know, having everyone fit at the same time is unusual. We'll see if Gabriel Jesus comes back, where he goes in January. I would imagine the club will try and move him on, even if it's on a loan, for example. But our squad is huge, it's bloated, and players like Trossard now may not get on the field in certain games. But Eze is the one that I've done a lot of shows on, I've loved for a long time. I know you have too. He's a player that both of us have wanted at Arsenal. His signing for me was the one that showed the intent in the window. It was the extra one. Hincapie was one that just was left field, the final piece, that overlapping left back, who can also play centre back. But it was Eze that, for me, changed the expectation. Before that, for me, we had a very good window, but I still felt that we were that one player short. The addition of Eze, for me, was KSE said, no, top four isn't enough, competing isn't enough. We want to go and win. Do you think that our fan base and our players and the manager are ready for the level of expectation that comes with the window? Because the outcry on Sunday will probably be tied to the fact that we have had an incredibly successful window and we are a good team.
Yeah, I think expectation, this is a tricky one, right? I think any club of our stature should go into a season expecting reasonably to compete for the biggest trophies, the Premier League and the Champions League. That's where we should be season in, season out. Now there's an ebb and a flow. Sometimes you're in a slightly rebuilding phase. Sometimes you're in the winning phase. And I think we are certainly in that phase now. This is the hard thing though. I want to try to thread this needle. I think it is totally appropriate to expect this team to compete to win the Champions League and the Premier League. It has the talent to do it. It has the numbers to do it. I think it has the manager to do it. What I don't think is reasonable is to say anything other than that is abject failure and everybody should be sacked and rip it up and start over. I mean, that way lies madness. That way lies Manchester United, right? And what they're going through. The fundamental facts are that we were very, very good last season. We were very, very good the season before. We were very, very good the season before. None of those seasons culminated in what we wanted, but none of those seasons were failure per se, right? They were seasons where in each of the key competitions, someone managed to finish above us. And that's not where we want to be, but I don't think you can regard that as failure. So the challenge is embrace the expectations, feel that that is the required bar for success, but you are not going to see me on this podcast at the end of May if we've had 89 points and finished second again going, we failed. I will say we fell short of expectations, but I won't regard it as failure. Failure to me, right, is you finish seventh with this team. You finished sixth, well, not even seventh, even third probably. You know, you finished below 80 points, but didn't have the same injury crisis. And even an injury crisis this season, I think it could prevent us from winning the title. I don't think it would wreck our season such that I would say a 70-point season was understandable. So, no, it's kind of a convoluted answer. Mikel and the club and the players need to embrace what is expected of them based on the resources at their disposal. But I am always going to push back at the idea that it's title or failure as the rubric for evaluating the season.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things you've touched on is injuries. That's already had a lot of people put their stalls out saying, no excuses, the squad's deep enough. And interestingly, I went into Sunday very confident. I went in looking at the squad we had. But one of the things I think that was quite striking from the game is the fact that a lot of these players are new. So they haven't played together. Madueke, for example, that was his first time really playing on the right wing for Arsenal. When you're 3-4-0 up against Leeds, it doesn't really have the same effect. And then you've got Marino playing as a right 8, which he's only ever done at a couple of times. Although I thought he did fine. But again, Mascara coming in 5 minutes into the game. These things matter. And whilst depth is very important, I think, as you've mentioned, you take your best players for your biggest games. You pick that team. And the starting 11 tends to pick itself in these games. And that's what I did at the weekend. But I do think that, to your point again about injuries and making the season collapse, I don't think it will. It's whether or not the, I guess, backups and the rotation options step up as we hope they will. But one big player that has come in is Hincapie. And one of the reasons that he's a big player is because it's an indication that Arsenal are really banking on Calafiori, but not gambling on his fitness. What did you make of that signing? Because as I said, that was kind of the left field one that came out of nowhere, but in my opinion, really was the icing on the cake to complete the squad.
It's really interesting. I can't get away from the conclusion that Mikel Arteta does have a focus on his defensive personnel and needing a certain amount of defensive personnel to feel secure in his season. It is probably the case that every club in world football would like to have more talent defensively because maybe even more than attacking backups. I think defensive backups tend to be a much, much lower quality player that can expose you to much greater downside, right? Because Saka is our best player. Nani Madueke came in and looked fine, right? That's fine. But if you lose a Gabriel and you have to play a Kivior, with all due respect to Kivior, if you had to do that over a 38-game season, I think that has a much bigger potential to damage your season. So I can understand why you'd want depth. The thing that's hard is almost like our left wing situation now, where you could legitimately see Nani Madueke, Leo Trossard, Gabriel Martinelli, and Eberechi Eze as options. Miles Lewis-Skelly, Calafiori, Hincapie, right? They're all vying, I would say, for that position. It feels like a lot. And I don't know if Hincapie is going to be seen more as a left center back backup. I think that's entirely possible. The only thing I can think is that Mikel wants someone who can overlap more than the other two options so that Eze can play off the left and then be a little more of a half space player, an inside player as a left wing, which lets Hincapie overlap. And I think he's the best profile for that. But candidly, I'm happy we have the depth. It felt a little bit like a transfer that if it didn't happen, I wouldn't regard us as incomplete, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that. But just let's go back to Eze because he's the fun one to talk about. And Eze's the one for me that addresses one of the biggest criticism, which Arsenal are a bit too static. Arsenal play those sideways passes. We go round the horseshoe. We end up playing outside the block too much. Eze's a player that wants the ball in between the lines. He wants it at the edge of the box. He wants to put people under pressure. And even whenever he went out wide and one touch, he was round Szoboszlai. His final product was poor, but you see the instinct, the movement, that kind of street football type thing that I don't think we have in the squad. Martinelli was an instinct player, but his confidence is just completely gone. And with Eze and then with Madueke, again, I see another player that can really stand his man up, go and play instinctive football, run into channels that we maybe couldn't before. But how much do you see that signing being an indication that Mikel is willing to really do things differently as opposed to play with a more structured build-up? Because you don't get that with Eze. You get a player that will play off the cuff.
Yeah, I'm just excited to go on the ride and find out, right? I love this player. He is a completely different kind of player to some of the other players Mikel has shown an affinity for. But in the end, Leo Trossard, I think, made himself a more valuable left-wing option than Martinelli over the last couple of seasons. And I see a lot of similarities in how they can play in the zones where they want to operate, although I think Eze is a higher-level player, even though I think Leo is underrated by a large section of our fan base. And Leo Trossard did not need an overlapping fullback to be effective. You know, he sometimes would drift in and out of games, but I don't think he needed that to be effective. And we saw it even a little cameo. I mean, Eze had to chase a ball into the corner, and as you pointed out, one touch killed Szoboszlai, went right by him. Right? The end product wasn't there, but he did it. I don't think there's going to be a problem with him having to play further outside. We haven't been a team that plays massively on the counterattack. But if we want to play on the counterattack, I think we have an option to do that with Gyökeres. And then the question is, can we get an outball to someone who can distribute to Gyökeres first time and have the instinct to play that pass? We saw Martinelli's biggest missed moment against Liverpool come when he was carrying the ball through the midfield and had an opportunity to play Gyökeres in and instead carried it all the way to the byline for a goal kick. I think Eze is going to be much better at picking out those runs and playing those balls. And I think he showed that against when he was playing for Palace with Mateta. Mateta really thrived with Eze. And I think Eze was a big reason why Mateta saw his career really develop so nicely there. So I do think he'll play left wing. I think that's where he'll be used. I'm curious to see if Hincapie plays a bit to give him overlapping and to try to add a dimension to our attack that teams have not been prepared for. That would certainly give us more crossing opportunities, more opportunities to find Gyökeres arriving in the box. But fundamentally, I think he will just be a really talented left wing option for us. I think that is his role, and that's where we'll see him.
Yeah, and a lot's been made of the fact we've only created 2 clear-cut open chances in the first 3 games. But for me, there's multiple reasons for that. First are 2 of the grounds we've been to. We also haven't conceded many. But at the same time, I think there's a lack of fluidity and chemistry in the team at the minute. I also think one of the downfalls of having a big squad is pre-season becomes harder. Getting players' fitness up becomes harder because some of those hard games that they might have got 70 or 80 minutes in pre-season, someone else needs 30 of those minutes to make sure they're sharp. Zubimendi and Norgard was an example of that, where they had to share minutes. And we've also had some players arrive late. But there's now going to be 2 weeks international football. Most of our squad are away. A lot of those players will play. It comes back. And to be honest, Newcastle aside, I think the games get easier. And I can't believe we're saying that about Man City. But I genuinely think that stylistically, that is an easier game for us than going away to Old Trafford, going away to Anfield, or going away to St. James's Park. But the question...
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. My question is more about kind of how do we kick on from here? What's your opinion on the next step? Because the minute we get back from this international break, the pressure is going to be huge.
Yeah, look, the pressure is going to be huge all season. The one thing I do believe fundamentally is that the league is very difficult. I don't see a team that I regard as so strong front to back, top to bottom in their performances so far that they're going to run away with it. Liverpool have obviously strengthened quite a bit by getting Isak, but they didn't get Guehi. I think they have some vulnerabilities defensively and in midfield. So we'll see. We'll see if they made the right decisions. that's, I think you cannot play every game, just like you can't be trying to score 2 goals in one, right? Like they'll sometimes say in basketball, you're trying to hit a 5-pointer or 6-point shot or something, right? You're trying to do that thing that closes the gap. You cannot play every match like you're trying to play to a 100-point pace. You can't walk out on the pitch every game. And I think we've been guilty of doing this at times where you feel the pressure that if you were to drop points there, it's fatal. And I think that's a byproduct of getting to 89 points and 91 goals scored and still falling short, is that you feel any drop points are fatal for us. But the key is to just play your game and not be so concerned about the impact of every game on your season overall. For me, the biggest thing, though, that maybe the Liverpool game will have taught Mikel a bit is this is just not a league where you can go out there every game and play marginal football and try to nudge the game in your favor. You've got to go bang the door down on these other teams. And so I expect coming out of the break, especially after the Forest game, if we have Saka back, right, which I expect that we will, Odegaard fully fit and ready, that you're going to see a very front-footed approach. You're going to see our best attacking talent out there as much as possible. I think the right expectation for this next run of games, don't walk away feeling the same regret you felt after Anfield, where you said if we had gone for it a bit more, we could have taken the points. Whether that's at look, away at St. James's Park, we've not been great there. Don't go there with a defensively oriented lineup with the expectation that you try to nick it at the death. Just go outplay them with your better talent. I think that's what I want to see, that Mikel is willing to put his best talent out there and just try to beat teams that are inferior to us,
Yeah, and we've got the players behind them. I think one of the things that's troubled me a bit with the Eze thing is Eze, I've seen play left wing back for England. He can put in big defensive shifts. He can be trusted. I think not starting him, perfectly valid, but get him on earlier, get him on at halftime. And I think that's something that Mikel would have seen, that cameo, and actually saw certain things within the cameo, such as his link up with Odegaard. That ball, that was 4 minutes after he came on. He played that ball across the box, skipped past Joe Gomez, played it into Odegaard. Odegaard actually played a great pass to Gyökeres, and that leads me on to my next point, which is Victor Gyökeres and how we adapt to his game. Because what I found interesting, that pass was very similar to how Haaland scored his goal a couple of hours before, where Marmoush dribbled into the box, ball breaks, Haaland's alive to it. Gyökeres, by contrast, was a bit flat-footed. There's been a clear adaptation to him coming to Arsenal. Do you think he looks fully fit yet? And do you think that we are adapting to his style of play? Because there's a big stylistic change here between our strikers.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. I mean, injuries and late signings mean that Gyökeres hasn't necessarily played with all the players that you'd want him to have the time with. I was frustrated in preseason. I want to say it was not the Spurs game, but Villarreal. I think we started a weird midfield and played it with Gyökeres, and so Gyökeres didn't get a chance to really develop that rapport with the midfielders who are going to have to learn his runs and learn to play with him. I think every minute he gets on the pitch with Zubimendi, Rice, and Odegaard is really helpful, and I think the same is going to go for Eze, for Saka, so they all understand where he's going to be and the kind of runs he's going to make. I think the other thing we just have to accept, though, is, Victor Gyökeres is a good player. I don't think he's Erling Haaland. I think there's only one Erling Haaland. I don't have the expectation of him having a 40-goal season for us.
Same.
It may be the case that he's quite good, and at times very, very good. But there are times where we notice that he's not in the absolute upper echelon of elite players, that he's not Haaland or Isak. And for what it's worth, I don't think we need Haaland or Isak to win a title, right? I mean, for many years, Liverpool have competed for and won titles where their best player is their right wide forward, right? And that's our best player too. We just need him out there. I also think that what happens in football is your best player being on the pitch, especially in attack, has a massive domino effect on improving the performance of every other player around him in terms of how the defense has to cope, in terms of that last ball being on time or in the right place at the right time. And I think when you see Bukayo Saka out there, I think we will see more from Gyökeres. I think we'll see more from everybody. But I think the attack will just look better because that's what happens to teams when their best player is there, you know?
Well, on that topic, a lot of people have said that Arsenal need to adapt the game to focus on Victor Gyökeres and get the most out of him. But in my opinion, Arsenal need to platform the best player in the squad, and that is Bukayo Saka. If we platform Saka, we platform everyone else because Saka makes everyone around him better. I also think that you've mentioned getting the best players on the pitch and going and out playing teams. I want to see Eze used in that left 8 role. I want to see Madueke used on the left wing, and I want to see Saka on the right and go out to blow teams away. I want to see fast start Arsenal coming back and this kind of dynamism that we had a couple of years ago, because the players we've got, they are quite clearly good enough to do that. And we've got more quality than we did then. So it's about going and making sure that we put that marker down. But on Saka, what are your thoughts on that one? Because there's going to be a confidence issue with it wasn't the same hamstring. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because there is a mental aspect to this as well that I think people overlook. When a player starts to get injuries, it plays on their mind.
Yeah, I don't know. I think injury analysis, I think there's a lot of wonderful sort of amateur, in quotes, analysis that's done about football and about Arsenal. I consider ours to be in that category for sure. But the worst analysis, I think, is generally about injuries because we have so little information. We are basing it entirely off guesses, and often guesses that aren't even in the right globe in terms of accuracy. And what I mean by that is every player's psychological constitution is different, right? Every player's physiology is obviously different. Periodization has changed, and the understanding of the best way to keep players fit. Where we once thought it was best not to play them, there's now a perception growing in, I think, that the physio world that keeping them playing at the same interval is actually better for long-term health. There's so much that has changed from the way we fundamentally understood fitness. Also, the players are changing. You know, these fast twitch, lightning quick athletes with repeat sprintability rather than these sort of big, bulky, warriors changes the kinds of injuries they can get. You know, now you're not seeing broken ankles, but you're seeing tons of soft tissue injuries. Trying to analyze who's going to get injured when is a fool's errand. I mean, there are certain players just are injury prone. And unfortunately, when they are, it's very rare that they stop being that. Mm-hmm. So what we have to kind of hope is that Bukayo Saka, until this one injury last season, was not injury prone. Is this a compensation injury? Trying to burst too much off one leg instead of the other, protecting the reconstructed hamstring, so to speak? I don't know. But anything I say could wind up being 100% right and just as easily 100% wrong. So I don't mean it to be a dodge. I think there will be people who will say things like, he needs to be rested. This guy's had injuries. You got to be careful. Where it could be the case that him playing more and learning to trust and regain balance and keeping the muscles trained is better. We just don't know. And to have a strong opinion of it, I think, is asking to just be wrong in public. So without wanting to dodge the question, I think these are the things where you just cross your fingers and hope, and I think that's just about the best you can do.
Yeah, well, overall, what are your thoughts on the window? Because it has been big. We've talked about injuries, we've talked about depth, but ultimately we have added some serious talent to the team, and we haven't seen a window like this before. It's one of those really weird ones because, as you've mentioned, Liverpool have got Isaac, and I think had Liverpool not have got Isaac, we would feel completely differently about this window. But at the same time, a lot of Liverpool fans, if you read away from the banter side of football and you look at the Liverpool fans that sit more in that kind of level-headed category online, they're all saying that actually there's a huge amount of pressure on Van Dijk this season, that they don't have balance across the team, and they are a very top-heavy team. So there is a worry there as well. Whilst they're rightly celebrating this incredible window, they're saying that we've got more balance. So I think we might lack an extra superstar, but we do have this incredibly balanced side in all departments.
Even with the Isak signing, it is simply the case that if Virgil van Dijk was to pick up an injury like what Kai just got and miss 12 weeks or so, their season could collapse, absolutely collapse. If Gravenberch got injured for 3 months, their season could collapse. I mean, they are the reverse poorly drawn horse meme. That's not exactly. I've heard people say that, and that's not fair because they have two phenomenal center backs. They have a nice group of midfielders, even if I think it's not a balanced group of midfielders. And even if I think we have the midfield to control their midfield, there are going to be a lot of weaker teams that just get blown away by them, I think. Yes, they have an impressive a trio of attackers that they can put out, up front. And that's the case. But you know what, Adam? Post Invincibles, this is easily the best Arsenal squad that we've ever had, without a doubt. I feel as confident in saying this as I've ever felt in any season. If we stay fit, I think we'll win the title. I think the talent level at Arsenal right now is as good as any squad in football. And I think we have a really big opportunity to go win things this season.
Yeah, and finally, my final question for you is, do you think that we need to stop looking at the title race as a head-to-head kind of one-off game with Liverpool and more of a marathon where actually there are 18 other teams in this division that we should be going and blowing away, and actually that's where we've dropped the points?
This is my problem, I think, with our approach the last couple of seasons. I really believe we've had this fear as a fan base. And I can't say if it's in the minds of the players, but it almost seems like it is. You say, where'd the fast starts go? I think where the fast starts went is this paralysis of, if we ever drop a point, we lost the title. That's what chasing City does to you. Forget last season with the injuries, but you get it in your mind that only 95 points can win a title. And to get to 95 points, you can't drop points anywhere. And we just dropped 2 points. We can only drop 6 more this season, whatever it is. You cannot play every game to get to 96 points. You can't kick off and at the kickoff of every game going, if we drop points in this game, we won't hit our goals. That is not a sustainable way to approach football matches. So I agree with you. I think we should look at ourselves and be like, we are the 900-pound gorilla in the room. We're going to absolutely batter teams. We weren't even great against Leeds, and we destroyed them 5-0. I think there's going to be plenty of that as long as we go into games putting our best offensive talent, our best attacking talent on the pitch, and play without the fear of what a dropped 2 points could mean for the title. You cannot win the title in any single game of the Premier League, and certainly not in September.
Couldn't have said it better. Elliot, massive thanks for coming on the show. Could you please tell everyone where they can find you for anyone that hasn't listened to you to this point?
Well, you can find the more talented people in my podcast, like Clive, Tim, Paul, Phil, on the Arsenal Vision podcast, available on all finer podcasting platforms, YouTube as well. We have a Patreon where we do bonus content basically every single day of the week, including instant reactions right at full time. But if you have any questions, obviously you can reach out to me on socials or on email. Happy to answer them, but just come check out the pod. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, as a long-term patron, I can happily say that it's the best £6 I spend every month. So go and sign up. Go and listen to Arsenal Vision and go and follow Elliot as well at Yankee Gunner. Huge thanks for joining. To everyone that's enjoyed the show, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the channel. Please come back for the next episode. We'll see you again very soon.